Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the prestigious Blackwater Defense Corporation building. Her worn sneakers made no sound against the polished floor as she moved between offices, emptying trash bins and wiping down desks. At 42, she had perfected the art of being invisible. Executives walked past her as if she were part of the furniture, discussing million-dollar contracts and classified military operations without a second thought about the woman scrubbing their coffee stains. The night shift suited Maria perfectly. She preferred the quiet hours when the building emptied of its high-powered occupants, leaving her alone with her thoughts and her work. What none of them knew was that Maria understood every word they spoke. She had been fluent in English for over 20 years, despite letting everyone believe she barely spoke the language. It was safer that way, easier to blend into the background when people assumed you couldn't comprehend their conversations. Tonight felt different, though. There was tension in the air that Maria couldn't shake. She had noticed increased security. Throughout the week, more guards patrolling the halls and hushed phone conversations that stopped abruptly when anyone approached. Something big was happening, and the energy in the building crackled with anticipation and worry. As Maria cleaned the executive conference room on the 15th floor, she couldn't help but notice the documents scattered across the mahogany table. Maps of foreign locations, personnel files with military photographs, and briefing papers marked with red stamps caught her attention. She had learned to read upside down years ago, a skill that proved useful in her invisible existence. The papers mentioned Operation Silent Thunder, a covert mission scheduled for the following week. The elevator dinged softly in the distance, and Maria quickly returned to her cleaning, spraying the table with disinfectant and wiping it down with practiced efficiency. Heavy footsteps approached the conference room, and she recognized the voice of Director Harrison, the man who ran the military contracting division. He was speaking in urgent tones to someone she couldn't see. "The intelligence is solid," Harrison was saying. "We have confirmation that Senator Mitchell is planning to expose our overseas operations. If that information goes public, we're looking at congressional hearings, criminal investigations, and the end of our government contracts." Maria continued cleaning, her movements slow and deliberate as she strained to hear more. Another voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to a man she had seen several times but didn't know by name. He was tall, always wore expensive suits, and had the kind of cold eyes that made Maria uncomfortable whenever their paths crossed. "We can't let that happen," the second voice said. "Too many people depend on these contracts. Too many families will lose their jobs if Blackwater goes under. We need a permanent solution to the Mitchell problem." The words sent a chill down Maria's spine. She had heard enough conversations in this building to know that when executives talked about permanent solutions, they weren't discussing retirement packages or reassignments. She finished cleaning the table and moved to the windows, trying to make her presence even less noticeable while continuing to listen. "The senator will be attending the charity gala next Friday at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel," Harrison continued. "Security will be lighter than usual because it's a private event. We have assets in place who can make it look like an accident or a robbery gone wrong." Maria's hands trembled slightly as she sprayed the window cleaner. She was hearing them plan a murder, and they were discussing it as casually as they might talk about quarterly earnings or vacation schedules. She had to keep cleaning, had to maintain the illusion that she was just another invisible worker who posed no threat to their plans. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with the two men discussing logistics, timing, and contingency plans. They mentioned specific individuals who would carry out the operation, including someone they referred to as the specialist, who would be arriving from overseas. Maria memorized every detail, knowing that this information could save an innocent man's life, but also knowing that possessing it put her in incredible danger. When the men finally left the conference room, Maria waited several minutes before allowing herself to breathe normally again. She finished her cleaning routine on autopilot, her mind racing with the implications of what she had overheard. Senator Mitchell was going to be assassinated, and she was the only person outside the conspiracy who knew about it. As she moved her cart to the next office, Maria thought about her own situation. She was an undocumented immigrant who had been working under a false identity for 15 years. Going to the police would mean revealing herself, risking deportation, and leaving. Her teenage daughter Anna, alone in a country where they had built a life together, but staying silent would mean allowing an innocent man to be murdered by people who saw human lives as obstacles to their profit margins. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of conflicted thoughts and careful planning. Maria knew she couldn't go to the authorities directly, but she also knew she couldn't do nothing. She had to find another way to warn Senator Mitchell or stop the assassination without exposing herself or her daughter to danger. As dawn broke over the city, and Maria prepared to leave the building, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She was going to find a way to stop these people, even if it meant risking everything she had worked so hard to build. The invisible cleaner who nobody noticed was about to become the most important witness in a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government and military contracting. Walking out into the morning sunshine, Maria Santos looked like any other tired cleaning woman heading home after a long night's work. But inside she carried information that could topple powerful people and save an innocent life. She just had to figure out how to use it without destroying herself and her daughter in the process. The game was about to begin and the stakes couldn't be higher. 3 days had passed since Maria overheard the assassination plot, and she still hadn't figured out how to act on the information without destroying her life. She went through her cleaning routine mechanically, her mind constantly working through different scenarios. Every option seemed to lead to the same conclusion: exposure, deportation, and leaving her daughter Anna vulnerable and alone. On Wednesday night, Maria was cleaning the 20th floor when she noticed someone working late in one of the corner offices. The nameplate on the door read J. Mackenzie, Security Consultant, but Maria had never seen this particular office occupied during her night shifts. Curious, she glanced through the partially open door and saw a man in his early 30s hunched over multiple computer monitors, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. What caught Maria's attention wasn't the man himself, but the images on his monitors. Military personnel files, satellite photographs, and what looked like surveillance footage filled the screens. But these weren't the typical corporate security files she occasionally glimpsed in other offices. These looked like active military intelligence, the kind of information that suggested this man wasn't just any security consultant. The man looked up suddenly, as if sensing her presence. His eyes met hers through the gap in the door, and Maria felt her heart skip a beat. She expected him to dismiss her with the typical indifference she received from everyone else in the building, but instead, he studied her face with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading people quickly and accurately. "You're Maria, right?" he said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. "You clean this floor every Wednesday and Friday." Maria nodded, surprised that he knew her name. Most people in the building didn't even acknowledge her existence, let alone learn her name or remember her schedule. "I'm Jake Mackenzie," he continued, standing up and walking toward the door. "I've been watching the security feeds and I've noticed you're very observant. You see things that other people miss." The comment made Maria nervous. If he had been watching her on the security cameras, had he noticed her listening to conversations she shouldn't have heard? Had he seen her reading documents when she thought no one was paying attention? "I clean," Maria said in heavily accented English, maintaining the persona she had cultivated for years. "I work, no problems." Jake smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "You don't have to pretend with me, Maria. I know you understand English perfectly. I also know you've been here for 15 years. You have a daughter who's a senior in high school, and you're one of the most reliable employees in this building." Maria's blood ran cold. This man knew far too much about her personal life, which meant he had been investigating her. In her experience, when people in this building started investigating the cleaning staff, it usually meant someone was about to lose their job or worse. "I know you're scared," Jake continued, his voice gentler. "Now, and you have every right to be, but I also think you might have information that could help save lives, and I want you to know that you're not alone." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Maria's mind raced as she tried to figure out if this was a trap or if Jake Mackenzie might actually be someone she could trust. After years of being invisible and powerless, the possibility of having an ally seemed too good to be true. "What do you want?" Maria asked, dropping the broken English act for the first time in years. Jake stepped back and gestured for her to come into his office. After a moment of hesitation, Maria pushed her cleaning cart aside and followed him. He closed the door behind her and activated what looked like a white noise generator, filling the room with a soft humming sound. "I'm not really a security consultant," Jake said, settling into his chair. "I'm a Navy SEAL, and I've been undercover here for the past 6 months investigating illegal weapons sales and potential treason. I know that Blackwater Defense has been selling military technology to hostile foreign governments, and I suspect they're planning something that goes way beyond profit margins." Maria stared at him, trying to process this revelation. A Navy SEAL working undercover in the same building where she had overheard an assassination plot. It seemed like too much of a coincidence, but the intensity in his eyes and the military bearing she now recognized suggested he was telling the truth. "3 nights ago," Jake continued, "I detected unusual electromagnetic signatures coming from the conference room on the 15th floor during a late-night meeting. Someone was using scrambled communications equipment, which suggests they were discussing something they didn't want any government agency to overhear. Were you cleaning that floor Monday night?" Maria's heart pounded as she realized that Jake wasn't fishing for information. He already suspected something significant had happened that night, and he had identified her as a potential witness. The question was whether she could trust him with the truth. "If I tell you something," Maria said carefully, "what happens to me and my daughter?" Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "If you have information about illegal activities, I can guarantee your protection. The Navy has programs for witnesses who help with national security investigations. You and your daughter would be relocated, given new identities, and provided with everything you need to start over safely. And if I don't tell you anything, then you go back to cleaning floors and I continue my investigation without your help. But Maria, if these people are planning what I think they're planning, staying silent won't keep you safe. If they realize you overheard something important, being invisible won't protect you anymore." The weight of his words settled over Maria, like a heavy blanket. She had spent years believing that invisibility was her protection, but Jake was right. If the people behind the assassination plot suspected she knew something, her anonymity would become her greatest vulnerability. Maria took a deep breath and made the second life-changing decision in less than a week. "Senator Mitchell is going to be murdered at the charity gala on Friday night," she said quietly. "I heard Director Harrison and another man planning it. They're bringing in a specialist from overseas to make it look like an accident or a robbery." Jake's expression didn't change, but Maria could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. He reached for a secure phone and began typing rapidly, sending what looked like an encrypted message. "Maria," he said after finishing his message, "I need you to tell me everything you heard, every detail you can remember, and then we need to figure out how to stop them without getting you killed in the process." As Maria began recounting the conversation she had overheard, she realized that her life as an invisible cleaning woman was over. She was now a key witness in a conspiracy that threatened national security, and she was working with a Navy SEAL to prevent an assassination. The stakes had never been higher, and there was no turning back. Jake Mackenzie spent the entire Thursday morning making encrypted phone calls and reviewing surveillance footage, while Maria continued her regular cleaning routine. They had agreed that maintaining normalcy was crucial to avoid raising suspicions. But everything had changed now that they were working together. Maria found herself noticing details she might have missed before, and Jake was using her insights to piece together a larger picture of the conspiracy. By Thursday evening, Jake had confirmed Maria's information through his military contacts. Senator Robert Mitchell was indeed planning to expose Blackwater Defense Corporation's illegal weapons sales to foreign governments. The senator had been gathering evidence for months, working with a team of investigators who had uncovered a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and military contracting. "The assassination makes perfect sense," Jake explained to Maria as they met in his office after hours. "If Mitchell goes public with what he knows, it won't just destroy Blackwater. It'll expose a dozen other companies and potentially implicate officials in the Pentagon and CIA. We're talking about billions of dollars in illegal profits and relationships with enemy governments that could be considered treason." Maria listened intently, realizing that she had stumbled into something far bigger than a simple murder plot. What about the specialist they mentioned? Have you found out who that is? Jake's expression darkened. His name is Viktor Kozlov, a former Russian Spetsnaz operative who works as a freelance assassin. He entered the country 2 days ago on a diplomatic passport, which means someone with serious government connections is protecting him. This isn't just corporate corruption anymore, Maria. This is international espionage. The weight of their situation settled over both of them. They weren't just trying to prevent a murder. They were uncovering a conspiracy that threatened national security, and they were running out of time. The gala is tomorrow night, Maria said. What can we do to stop it? Jake had been working on that problem all day. I can't involve my regular chain of command because we don't know how deep this corruption goes. If I report this through normal channels, the information might reach someone who's part of the conspiracy. But I have a contact at the FBI, someone I trust completely, who can help us. Maria felt a flutter of hope, but Jake's next words brought her back to reality. The problem is that we need proof. My word and your testimony won't be enough to stop this, especially since you're undocumented and I'm operating outside my official capacity. We need evidence that will force immediate action, something so compelling that they can't ignore it or bury it. What kind of evidence? Jake pulled up building schematics on his computer. I need to get into Harrison's office and access his computer. Based on what you overheard, he's coordinating this operation, which means there will be digital communications, financial records, and operational plans. But his office is on the executive floor, and the security there is significantly tighter than anywhere else in the building. Maria studied the schematics, noting the placement of security cameras, keycard readers, and motion sensors. An idea began forming in her mind, crazy but potentially workable. I can get you in, she said quietly. Jake looked at her skeptically. Maria, I appreciate your willingness to help, but this isn't cleaning floors. We're talking about breaking into one of the most secure offices in the building, avoiding multiple security systems, and extracting data from encrypted computers. This is the kind of operation that requires months of planning and a team of specialists. But you're forgetting something, Maria said, pointing to the cleaning schedule posted on the wall. Tomorrow is Friday. I clean the executive floor every Friday night, and I have master key access to every office in the building. The security guards know me. The cameras are used to seeing me, and nobody pays attention to the cleaning lady. Jake stared at her for a long moment, and Maria could see him working through the possibilities in his mind. It was audacious, risky, and completely dependent on Maria's ability to act naturally while carrying out an espionage operation. But it might be their only chance. Even if you can get me into the office, Jake said, I'd need at least 30 minutes to crack Harrison's computer and extract the relevant data. Can you create a distraction that would keep security occupied for that long? Maria smiled for the first time since this whole ordeal began. You underestimate how invisible cleaning ladies can be. I've been working in this building for 15 years, and I know every security guard, every routine, and every blind spot. I can get you 30 minutes, maybe even an hour if needed. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying Maria with new respect. You realize that if we get caught, they won't just fire you. These people are planning to murder a United States senator. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their operation. I know, Maria said, thinking of her daughter Anna and the life they had built together. But if we don't stop them, Senator Mitchell dies and they get away with everything. How many more people will they kill to protect their secrets? How many more weapons will they sell to America's enemies? Jake nodded slowly. All right, we do this tomorrow night. But Maria, I need you to understand that once we cross this line, there's no going back. Your life as you know it is over, regardless of how this turns out. My life changed the moment I heard them planning murder, Maria replied. At least this way I'm fighting back instead of just hiding. They spent the next several hours planning every detail of their operation. Jake would hide in Maria's cleaning cart, covered by linens and supplies, while she transported him to the executive floor. Once there, he would slip into Harrison's office while Maria created a distraction by reporting a water leak in the building's main conference room, which would require security to investigate and potentially evacuate part of the floor. The plan was simple, which made it both elegant and terrifying. So much could go wrong, and they would have no backup if things went sideways. But it was their only chance to get the evidence they needed to stop the assassination and expose the conspiracy. As Friday morning arrived, Maria went home to her small apartment and tried to act normal around her daughter Anna. She made breakfast, helped Anna with her college application essays, and listened to her teenage complaints about homework and boyfriend drama. It felt surreal, maintaining the pretense of ordinary life while preparing to risk everything in a few hours. That evening, as Maria prepared for what might be her last shift as an invisible cleaning woman, she thought about all the conversations she had overheard, all the secrets she had learned, and all the times she had remained silent when she could have spoken up. Tonight, the invisible woman was going to become visible in a way that would change everything. The question was whether she and Jake could survive long enough to see justice done. Friday night arrived with an unusual stillness that made Maria's nerves tingle with anticipation. She arrived at the Blackwater Defense Building at her regular time, but tonight felt different from every other night she had worked there. Tonight, she wasn't just Maria Santos, the invisible cleaning lady. Tonight she was part of a dangerous operation that could save a man's life or get them both killed. Jake was waiting in his office when Maria arrived, dressed in black tactical clothing that made him look more like the Navy SEAL he truly was than the security consultant he pretended to be. He had a small backpack filled with electronic equipment, data extraction devices, and communication gear that looked far more sophisticated than anything a typical security consultant would possess. You ready for this?" Jake asked, studying Maria's face for any sign of doubt or fear. "I've been ready since the moment I decided to trust you," Maria replied, though her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted her cleaning supplies to make room for Jake in the large cart. The plan required perfect timing and nerves of steel. Maria would wheel Jake through the building's corridors hidden beneath cleaning linens, past security cameras and guards who had seen her make this exact journey hundreds of times before. Once they reached the executive floor, Jake would slip out and into Harrison's office while Maria created the water leak distraction that would occupy building security for at least 30 minutes. As Jake climbed into the cleaning cart and Maria covered him with sheets and towels, she realized how much trust they were placing in each other. If Jake was lying about being a Navy SEAL, if this was some elaborate trap, she was walking directly into her own destruction. But something in his eyes and the professional way he handled himself convinced her that he was exactly who he claimed to be. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like it lasted forever. Maria's heart pounded so loudly she was sure the security guard who nodded politely to her could hear it. But years of invisibility served her well now. She moved with the same unhurried efficiency she had displayed every Friday night for 15 years, giving no indication that tonight was any different from hundreds of other nights. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Maria was relieved to see only one security guard at the main desk, just as Jake had predicted. The guard, a middle-aged man named Robert who always treated Maria with kindness, looked up from his crossword puzzle and smiled. "Evening, Maria. Running a little late tonight?" "Small spill on 12. Maria replied in her practiced broken English. "Extra work tonight." Robert nodded sympathetically and returned to his puzzle. Maria wheeled her cart down the hallway toward Harrison's office, her footsteps echoing softly on the marble floor. When she reached the office door, she knocked softly, to make sure it was empty, then used her master key to open it. Jake emerged from the cart like a shadow, moving with the fluid precision of someone trained for this kind of work. He squeezed Maria's shoulder briefly, a gesture of thanks and encouragement, then slipped into Harrison's office while Maria continued down the hallway toward the main conference room where she would create her distraction. Maria had never sabotaged anything in her life, but desperation and adrenaline made her hands steady as she disconnected the water line behind the conference room's small kitchenette. Water began pooling on the expensive carpet, and Maria called security to report the emergency, affecting panic and concern in her voice. Within minutes, Robert and 2 other security guards were examining the water leak, discussing whether they needed to call emergency maintenance and evacuating the conference room area. The distraction was working perfectly, giving Jake the time and space he needed to access Harrison's computer. But as Maria continued her cleaning routine in nearby offices, she became aware of sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps in the hallway that were too heavy and too purposeful to belong to security guards. Voices speaking in low, urgent tones that carried an edge of authority and danger. Through the office window, Maria saw a black SUV pull up to the building's main entrance. 3 men in expensive suits got out, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested military or intelligence training. One of them she recognized from Monday night's conversation, the cold-eyed man who had discussed the assassination with Harrison. Maria's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. Someone had figured out that their operation was compromised, and they were coming to clean up the evidence. Jake was trapped in Harrison's office with no way to know that. Danger was approaching from multiple directions. Without thinking, Maria abandoned her cleaning cart and ran toward Harrison's office. She had to warn Jake, had to give him a chance to escape before the conspirators arrived. But as she rounded the corner, she found herself face to face with Viktor Kozlov, the Russian assassin who was supposed to kill Senator Mitchell in just a few hours. Kozlov was tall and lean with pale eyes that seemed to evaluate Maria as both a threat and an obstacle to be eliminated. He said something in Russian, then switched to accented English when Maria didn't respond. "You are the cleaning woman, yes? The one who listens to conversations she should not hear?" Maria's training in invisibility deserted her completely. She stood frozen in the hallway, staring at a man who killed people for money and who now knew that she was a witness to the assassination plot. Every instinct told her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the marble floor. "I clean," Maria said, weakly falling back on her old persona. "I work, no problems." Kozlov smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "We both know that is not true. You understand everything, and you have been sharing information with the American soldier, who pretends to be a security consultant. This is very unfortunate for you." The sound of Jake's voice came from Harrison's office, speaking in urgent tones to someone on a secure phone. He was uploading the evidence they had found, transmitting it to his FBI contact, but he had no idea. That discovery was moments away. Kozlov reached inside his jacket and Maria saw the handle of a pistol with a silencer attached. In that moment, she realized that her years of being invisible and powerless were over. If she was going to die tonight, she would die fighting for something that mattered. Maria lunged forward, not toward safety but toward danger, throwing herself at Kozlov with all the strength and desperation she could muster. The assassin was caught off guard by her sudden movement, stumbling backward as Maria clawed at his face and tried to prevent him from drawing his weapon. "Jake!" Maria screamed as loudly as she could. "Run! They found us!" The hallway erupted into chaos as Jake burst from Harrison's office, taking in the situation at a glance. He had his own weapon drawn and was moving toward them when the elevator doors opened, and the 3 men from the SUV emerged, armed and ready for a firefight. Maria found herself in the middle of a deadly confrontation between trained killers, with no weapons, no training, and no protection except her determination to stop people who treated human lives as business expenses. The invisible cleaning woman was about to discover just how visible she could become when everything was on the line. As gunshots began echoing through the executive floor, Maria realized that her old life was ending in the most violent way possible. But if she and Jake could survive the next few minutes, they might just save Senator Mitchell's life and expose a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of American democracy. The question was whether either of them would live long enough to see justice done. The first gunshot shattered the marble wall inches from Maria's head, sending fragments flying as she dove for cover behind her abandoned cleaning cart. Jake had taken position at the corner of Harrison's office, using the doorframe for protection, while returning fire at the 3 armed men who had emerged from the elevator. Viktor Kozlov had rolled away from Maria's desperate attack and was now crouched behind a decorative pillar, his silenced pistol searching for a clear shot. "Maria, stay down," Jake shouted over the sound of gunfire. "There's a stairwell at the end of the hall. When I give you the signal, run for it and don't look back." But Maria couldn't run. Not when Jake was outnumbered 4-1. Not when she knew these men would hunt her down regardless of whether she fled now or stayed to fight. And somewhere in the chaos of fear and adrenaline, she realized something that surprised her. She trusted Jake Mackenzie completely. After years of trusting no one except her daughter, she had found someone worth risking her life for. The security guards who had been investigating the water leak were now trapped in the conference room, having barricaded themselves inside when the shooting started. Their radios crackled with desperate calls for backup, but Maria knew that regular police wouldn't arrive in time to make a difference. This fight would be decided in the next few minutes by whoever had better training, better weapons, or better luck. Jake was holding his own against impossible odds, his military training evident in the way he controlled the engagement and used the environment to his advantage. But Maria could see that he was running low on ammunition, and the assassins were coordinating their movements to trap him in a crossfire. They needed a game changer, something to shift the odds in their favor. That's when Maria remembered something Jake had told her during their planning session. He always carried a backup weapon, a high-powered sniper rifle that he kept locked in a case in his office for emergencies. The office was only 30 feet away, but it might as well have been 30 miles given the volume of gunfire filling the hallway. "Jake," Maria called out during a brief lull in the shooting. "Your office, the rifle." Jake understood immediately, but shook his head. "Too dangerous. I can't leave you exposed." "I can get there," Maria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're not shooting at the cleaning lady. I'm still invisible to them." It was a desperate gamble based on nothing more than hope and psychology. Maria was betting that even in the middle of a firefight, trained killers would focus on the armed threat rather than an unarmed cleaning woman. It was the same invisibility that had protected her for years, but now she was weaponizing it in a way she had never imagined possible. Before Jake could stop her, Maria began crawling across the hallway floor, moving slowly and deliberately like someone trying to escape rather than someone with a specific tactical objective. The assassins barely glanced at her, their attention focused on Jake's position and their attempts to flank him. Kozlov did notice her movement, but when he raised his pistol to eliminate what he saw as a fleeing witness, Jake opened fire and forced the Russian to take cover again. The brief exchange gave Maria the time she needed to reach Jake's office and locate the rifle case hidden behind his desk. Maria had never held a military weapon in her life, but desperation and adrenaline made her fingers work with surprising efficiency as she opened the case and lifted out Jake's sniper rifle. The weapon was heavier than she had expected, but there was something reassuring about its solid weight and precision construction. "Maria," Jake called out urgently. "Can you handle that thing?" Maria thought about her daughter Anna, about Senator Mitchell who would die tonight if they failed, and about all the years she had remained silent while powerful people planned terrible things. She thought about trust, about courage, and about the moment when an invisible person chooses to become visible for something that matters. "I grew up in El Salvador during the Civil War," Maria called back to Jake. "My father taught me to shoot before he was killed by government soldiers. I haven't forgotten." The admission surprised even Maria. She had never told anyone about her father's death or the skills he had taught her during the violent years of her childhood. But holding Jake's rifle brought back memories of a different life, when survival had depended on courage and accuracy rather than invisibility and silence. Jake's voice carried a note of respect and relief. "The rifle is zeroed for 200 meters, but you'll be shooting at close range. Aim low and squeeze the trigger slowly. And Maria, thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for trusting me," Maria replied, chambering around and moving to the office window that overlooked the hallway. From her elevated position, Maria had a clear view of the battlefield. The three assassins from the SUV had spread out to create multiple angles of attack, while Kozlov was trying to work his way around to Jake's blind spot. They were professional killers who had probably done this dozens of times before, but they had never faced a Navy SEAL with backup from an invisible cleaning woman who had nothing left to lose. Maria steadied the rifle against the window frame, remembering her father's voice from 30 years ago. "Breathe slowly, find your center, become one with the weapon." The first shot was the hardest, breaking through years of fear and invisibility to embrace the violence that would either save them or destroy them. The rifle kicked against her shoulder as the bullet found its target, sending one of the assassins spinning to the floor with a cry of pain and surprise. The remaining attackers suddenly realized they were facing a sniper, but they couldn't see Maria's position clearly enough to return effective fire. Jake seized the advantage immediately, advancing from his defensive position to press the attack. His military training took over completely as he coordinated with Maria's covering fire to systematically eliminate the remaining threats. Within minutes, the hallway was quiet, except for the sound of approaching sirens in the distance. Viktor Kozlov was the last to fall, brought down by Maria's third shot as he tried to reach the stairwell. The Russian assassin who had come to America to murder a United States senator would never complete his mission, stopped by a cleaning woman who had decided that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the consequences. As federal agents poured into the building, Maria realized that she was no longer invisible. She was a hero, a witness, and a target all at the same time. Her old life was over, but for the first time in years she felt like she had control over her destiny. She had trusted someone completely, and that trust had saved not only her life, but potentially the life of Senator Mitchell and the integrity of American democracy. Jake approached her carefully, noting how naturally she handled the rifle and how calm she appeared, despite having just participated in a deadly firefight. "Maria Santos," he said with genuine admiration, "you are definitely not just a cleaning lady." Maria smiled, feeling stronger and more confident than she had in decades. "No," she agreed, "I'm not. And I never will be again." 6 months later, Maria Santos stood in the Witness Protection Program's safe house in Colorado, watching her daughter Anna pack for her first semester at Georgetown University. The scholarship Anna had received was real, earned through her own academic achievements, but the full-ride package and the pristine new identity documents were courtesy of a grateful government that owed Maria more than it could ever repay. The woman looking back at Maria from the mirror was barely recognizable as the invisible cleaning lady who had once scrubbed floors in the Blackwater Defense Building. Gone were the worn uniforms and tired eyes, replaced by someone who carried herself with quiet confidence and spoke with the authority of someone who had stared down international assassins and lived to tell about it. The congressional hearings had dominated news cycles for months. Senator Robert Mitchell, very much alive thanks to Maria's courage, had testified about the weapons trafficking conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and military contracting. 17 people had been arrested, including Director Harrison and 5 Pentagon officials who had been taking bribes in exchange for classified information. Jake McKenzie had been promoted and decorated for his undercover work, but he had also requested a transfer to a training position where he could help prepare other operatives for similar missions. The experience of working with Maria had taught him that the most valuable intelligence assets often came from the most unexpected places, and he wanted to share that lesson with the next generation of Navy SEALs. "Mom, are you sure you're going to be okay without me?" Anna asked, interrupting Maria's thoughts. Her daughter had adapted to their new life with the resilience of youth, but Maria could see the concern in her eyes. Anna was the only person who truly understood what Maria had sacrificed to save a stranger's life and expose a conspiracy. "I'm going to be fine," Maria assured her, and for the first time in years, she meant it completely. "I have a new job starting next week, remember? And Washington, D.C. isn't that far from Colorado. We can visit each other whenever you want." The new job was another gift from a government that recognized Maria's unique talents. She would be working as a consultant for the FBI, helping train agents to notice things that others missed and teaching them how to gather intelligence in plain sight. Her years of invisibility had become a valuable skill set in a world where the most dangerous threats often hid behind legitimate businesses and respectable facades. But the real transformation in Maria's life wasn't professional, it was personal. For the first time since arriving in America 20 years ago, she felt like she belonged. She had a voice, she had value, and she had proven that one person's courage could make a difference even against seemingly impossible odds. Jake visited the safe house that evening to say goodbye before Anna left for college. He had become more than just an ally to Maria. He had become a trusted friend who understood the weight of the choices they had made together. Their partnership during those terrifying hours in the Blackwater building had forged a bond that transcended their different backgrounds and experiences. "I brought you something," Jake said, handing Maria a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of Senator Mitchell with his grandchildren, along with a handwritten note that read, "To Maria Santos, who saved not just my life but the lives of everyone I love. Your courage gives me hope for this country. With eternal gratitude, Robert Mitchell." Maria studied the photograph, thinking about the chain of events that had started with her overhearing a conversation and ended with her holding a sniper rifle in a corporate hallway. It still seemed surreal, like something that had happened to someone else, but the evidence was undeniable. She had changed from invisible to visible, from powerless to powerful, from someone who cleaned up other people's messes to someone who cleaned up corruption at the highest levels of government. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked, watching her expression carefully. "Everything you gave up? Everything you went through?" Maria considered the question seriously. She had lost her anonymity, her old identity, and the simple predictability of her previous life. She would always have to look over her shoulder, always have to be careful about who she trusted, always have to live with the knowledge that there were powerful people who would kill her if they could find her. But she had also gained something invaluable, the knowledge that she was capable of extraordinary courage when it mattered most. She had learned that trust, when placed in the right person, could move mountains and stop bullets. She had discovered that being invisible was sometimes a choice rather than a circumstance, and that choosing to be visible at the right moment could save lives. "I don't regret it," Maria said finally. "For 20 years I was afraid of being seen, afraid of being noticed, afraid of what would happen if people knew who I really was. But when I finally stepped out of the shadows, I found out who I really could be. I found out that I was stronger and braver than I ever imagined possible." Anna hugged her mother tightly before getting into the car that would take her to the airport. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. "Not just for what you did, but for who you've become." As the car disappeared down the mountain road, Maria felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with endings and everything to do with beginnings. She was no longer Maria Santos, the invisible cleaning lady. She was no longer hiding from her past or running from her fears. She was someone who had been trusted with a Navy SEAL's rifle and had proven worthy of that trust. She was someone who had faced down international assassins and corporate conspirators and had emerged victorious. She was someone who had chosen to be visible when it mattered most, and in doing so had helped preserve the integrity of American democracy. Jake's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message, and he glanced at it briefly before looking up at Maria with a familiar expression of serious concern mixed with respect. "New case," he said simply. "Corporate espionage ring with ties to foreign intelligence services. The FBI could use someone with your particular set of skills. Someone who knows how to see things that other people miss." Maria smiled, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline and purpose that had become her new normal. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning," Jake replied. "But Maria, this one could be even more dangerous than Blackwater. Are you sure you're ready for another fight?" Maria thought about her father, who had taught her to shoot during a civil war. She thought about her daughter, who was now safely on her way to a bright future at one of America's most prestigious universities. She thought about Senator Mitchell's grandchildren, who would grow up in a democracy that was a little safer because their grandfather was still alive to fight for it. "I've been ready my whole life," Maria said, and meant every word. "I just didn't know it until someone trusted me enough to hand me a rifle." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, Maria Santos prepared for the next chapter of her extraordinary transformation from invisible cleaning lady to visible guardian of American democracy. The woman who had once feared being noticed was now someone whose vigilance helped protect millions of people who would never know her name. She was no longer invisible, but she was exactly who she was meant to be. And that, Maria realized, was worth every risk she had taken and every sacrifice she had made. The cleaning lady who nobody noticed had become someone who made sure the right people noticed everything that mattered.